Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the lapped zipper sample using the open method, which is different than what you learned in beginning. In beginning, you learned the closed seam method. This is the open seam method. So you're going to get a piece of fabric like this with various prints on it, and you're going to get a zipper. And I've tried to find a zipper that would show up and fabric that would show up. So then what you're going to do is just take your fabric, and I'm just going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to cut it here in half. Okay, and then where I cut it, that's going to be my opening for my zipper. So just to kind of show you how you take that one piece of fabric. Okay, so here is my zipper. Here's my fabric that I'm going to sew my zipper in. And notice how I've got my selvage here, so I'm sewing it straight grain right here. And that's usually how zippers are put in. Okay, now I'm going to mark where my zipper starts by just putting the very top of the tape here, because if I had a 5/8 seam allowance, then that 5/8 seam allowance would be right here. So, wait, that's not a very good ending here. Let me just, so there's my 5/8 would be right here. So that ends just a little bit above the zipper. So usually you can put your zipper tape, the end of it right up to the top. Okay, and then I'm going to mark where the end of the zipper is going to be, and I'm going to end it right here below the metal piece. Okay, so right here. Okay, so that's where my zipper goes. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to sew a 5/8 seam up to where the zipper begins. Okay, so, and I'm sewing it in blue thread, so nothing matches, which is good. Then you can see it better. So I'm just going to do regulation stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch at both where I begin and where I end. And I'm going to go right up here to where my pin is, okay, and back stitch. Okay. All right, then I'm going to press it good. And pressing it is critical so that it will actually work. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my sleeve board, and I'm going to lay this here, and I'm going to first press the seam open. Okay. All right, and so I've got that pressed open, but I'm going to stop where I stopped sewing. Okay, then I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to turn it to the right side. And we have a little saying for the lap zipper, you've probably heard it. The lap, which is the part that goes over top of the zipper, is on the left as you look at it. So that means this side is the overlap, and this one is the underlap. Now, the thing that we like about a lap zipper is that it kind of offsets your zipper slightly, so that, and the overlap can cover it up so you don't see the zipper or the zipper teeth. On a centered zipper, you see the zipper teeth because it's right in the center and it kind of opens up. So this way you don't see it. So it's a really great method, and it's the one I prefer and I like, and I think it's a little higher quality, so that's the one we're putting into our little dress here. Okay, so our overlap needs to be pressed at 5/8, so it will follow the seam that I have just sewn. Okay, and the underlap, because we're going to offset the zipper towards the overlap, I'm actually going to press this side at 1/2 inch, which means it won't match up to my seam. Okay, so let's do this one first. So here's my underlap, and I'm going to press this one at 1/2 inch. Okay, and if you have a seam gauge, that works good. I just have a seam tape here, so I'm going to make sure I got my 1/2 inch here, and I'm going to measure here in the middle, and that is 1/2 inch as well. So I'll go ahead and press up to there. Okay. Okay, and press good, get some steam going, because that's going to help you get your zipper in correctly. And now when I get down to my 5/8, remember, this is not going to match up to the 5/8. So I'm just going to scoot this over 1/8 of an inch from that seam to give me my 1/2 inch. Okay, I gotta scoot that over a little bit more here. Okay, so there's 1/2 inch. Okay, so, and yep, that looks good. So, and I'm just gonna press this. I'm gonna even press it down past that seam just a tiny bit. Okay, so now when I flip that over, can you see how this is pressed 1/8 of an inch from where I've sewn? This is so critical to have that little space right there. Okay, and you can see how this one is pressed at 1/2 inch, and it does not follow the 5/8. It's 1/8 of an inch over. Okay, now I'm going to do the overlap. The overlap does match up with the 5/8, so I'm going to press that at 5/8. I'm just going to measure it here at the top to get my 5/8, and just measure it all the way down and make sure I've got a good 5/8 here. So this zipper can be put into any seam with a 5/8 seam allowance. So there, okay, so I'm pressing that, and you can see how that totally lines up to my 5/8. Okay, and I'm just gonna, perfect, I've got a perfect 5/8 all the way up. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our zipper, and I'm going to take my 1/2 inch underlap, and I'm going to put that first, and I'm just gonna go ahead and pin that right to the edge. I'll grab some pins here, and I'm gonna pin that right to the edge of the zipper tape. And I'm going to undo this a little bit. So can you see how I've pinned it right to that edge? Okay, so you can see how close that is, okay? And just get that nice and smooth, okay? And I like really sharp pins. I like to get the sharp pins with a glass head so that the head doesn't melt and it just slides into your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and undo my zipper a little bit more while I get that pinned. Okay, and when I get it pinned to about here, I'm actually going to slide the zipper up now so that it's not in the way of where I'm pinning or sewing. Okay, now I've noticed here that I've got a little bit of a gap there, so I'm actually going to lower my zipper. I think I've got it pulled up a little too high, so I'm actually going to lower that right there so that let me just put that back so you can see it. So I'm going to do that right here. Okay, so my stitching stops right below that metal zipper stop. Okay, now I'm going to go up from there. I think that'll work good. Okay, and I've got this pinned again, and I can slide this zipper back and forth as needed while I'm sewing. But I'll go ahead and get that pinned. Okay, yeah, that looks really good. So I've got the top of the zipper, the fabric of the zipper is just barely underneath where I sew my seam. So if I do my seam at 5/8, then I will have a little bit of room so I can put a hook and eye and my zipper will stand there. Okay, so now I'm ready to sew the understitch. And one thing I want to show you is I can actually sew this down even past where I stop stitching because it's just going to be inside. So I'm actually going to pin it down here a little ways, and I'm going to start just a little ways below here. Okay, so let's go over to the machine. Okay, so the number 4 foot is my zipper foot, and it's a really skinny little foot, and you put your needle on one side or the other. The reason we use the zipper foot is so I can get my needle up close to the zipper teeth. So I've got to take out my basic presser foot or multi-purpose one, number 1, put in number 4, clamp, get it on the clamp, push it down, and I'm almost ready. If I don't move my needle is going to hit the middle of this foot and break. So you always want to have your needle next to the zipper. So if I'm going to sew from, and I like to sew from the bottom up, so that if it kind of pulls it, I've got a space for it to go. So I now need to move my zipper to the right side, close to the zipper, and you move it all the way. Okay, and then I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm right next to the edge. I'm like a 1/16 of an inch away. Okay, and I'm going to back stitch here because this part won't show because I'm below the stitching where I stopped stitching. So I'm just going to do a couple of back stitches here. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to keep, I'm going to move this thread, it's kind of in the way here. Okay, I'm going to keep, let me just make sure that's not there. Okay, I'm going to keep the edge of my zipper foot on the edge of the folded, the fabric that's folded. And I'm just going to stitch right along that edge. Okay, so be, you know, just go slow and careful. Okay, and again, I've got the edge of my zipper foot along the folded edge of the fabric, and my needle is next to the teeth. And see, that allows me to stitch right close to the teeth. Now, when I get up close to the zipper pull, that's bulky, and if I don't move it, I'll end up kind of going around it. So what I'm going to do, I'm close to it now, I'm going to leave my needle down into the fabric, lift up my presser foot, and slide that zipper pull down so it's out of the way. There. And now I can just continue sewing. And what's great about this is my seam is open. I'm not, I know exactly where I'm sewing. I can see exactly what I'm doing. I won't have to take out basting stitches when I'm finished. And I'm taking out my pins before I get to them. You don't want to go over your pins. It will really cause a problem. Not just with your needle hitting it and becoming dull, but it also causes kind of a bump. And I'm going to backstitch here because this will be caught into a seam allowance. When we do this zipper on the little girl's dress, we will treat the top of that just a little bit different. Okay, so now I am, okay, now this kind of caught under here. So I'm gonna just go through and cut a little bit of that off and get that so it's not so bulky there. Okay, so when I started, the thread got caught underneath, so it kind of makes a bunching, but I can get most of that out. So okay, so let's just go to the other side now. Okay, so let's trim that off. Okay, so now I've got that side done. I'm actually going to zip it up, and can you see that okay? Okay, and now I'm going to close this, and because this one is pressed on 5/8, it will just go flat straight up, where this one, see how using the 1/2 inch has offset my zipper a little bit towards the underlap. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, this will just cover the stitching, and it will come straight up from the bottom, and I'm going to pin it. Now when I pin this though, I'm only going to pin the zipper tape part to this side. I don't want to put any pins on this side. I only want to pin on the overlap side, okay? And I want it to overlap 1/8. So that means, let me get that nice and straight. So that means that it will just, it will cover the stitching from the underlap and go over top, just like a 1/16. Because I stitched it at a 1/16 from the edge, and so it'll overlap a 1/16 because I've got 1/8 of an inch there to work with. So on your zippers, it's important to be accurate on your 5/8 when you stitch on your overlap pressed at 5/8 and your underlap pressed at 1/2 inch. You want to keep that nice and accurate. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going up here. And look at how nicely I've matched up this print. I cut it right along here, so it should match up, but it looks beautiful. Okay, so I've got that here, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this zipper. Now, because of how I've pinned it, I can actually undo this zipper, okay, because I haven't got any of this side into the pinning. So I'm going to come up here and look at this. Look how that kind of goes off. I'm actually going to kind of push that back up a little bit again, because it went off because of the pull part, the zipper pull. Okay, so I've got this pinned good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave that zipper pull there. I'm going to come over here, and where this stops, see right here where my stitching is, it stops right here. I'm going to put my needle in there because that's right below the metal clasp, or the metal stop, zipper stop. And I'm not going to backstitch, and I'm going to come over 3/8 of an inch, because this overlap should be 3/8. So I'm going to come over 3/8, and I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to go straight up, and then I'll show you how I open this up and use the throat plate to guide me. So I don't need a piece of tape. I don't need all that extra stuff because I've got my seam. I'll show you how this works. Okay, so I'm ready now to stitch the top stitching on the overlap. So I've moved my needle to the other side of the presser foot so that my needle is between the presser foot and the zipper, and I'm going to put my needle down right at the bottom of that clasp, the metal zipper stop, and also where my seam ends here. And when I go across the zipper here, I'm going to hand stitch it. Actually, because there's the zipper teeth are above it, I could actually just stitch it across, but I'm going to hand wheel it just because I want to make sure I get it. Okay, now let's see. I want to make sure I'm 3/8. Okay, and that is exactly. Okay, that's exactly 3/8, so I'm good. So now I pivot, turn it, and take this out of there. And I need to go about 1 inch before I can move my zipper down. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a pin right here at this 3/8, and I can just kind of follow that. And then, see right here, but I don't want to go over the pin. Okay, so let me just make sure I'm at 3/8, yep. And I need to go a little bit further. So again, I'm just going to put this little pin right here just to kind of mark it, so I have something to help me gauge, and just make sure that's 3/8 here. Okay, and I got to go, yeah, like I said, I got to go a little bit further. So I need to go about 1 inch, maybe a little tiny bit more. And I'm going to just go, yeah, a little bit more here, right before this pin. Okay, now that's good. Okay, now I'm at 3/8, so I'm going to lift up my presser foot, and I'm going to unzip the zipper. Okay, keep your needle anchored. And now once I get my zipper down, then I can line this up to the throat plate. Now, it's not going to line up exactly on the 3/8 line here, because my needle, I've moved it over to the right. So I just need to make sure that wherever this is landing here on the throat plate, I keep it there, and it's actually at the 1/2 inch or 4/8 because I've moved this over about 1/8. So what I'm going to do now to guide my top stitching here on the zipper is I'm going to keep the edge of this overlap on the line here on this throat plate, which is actually the 1/2 inch line. Okay, and I'm just going to stop and remeasure, and yep, it's going great. Take this pin out and match that up good. Okay, and I want to keep that nice and flat. So I want to get close to this pin, take that out. Okay. And I can take that pin out, but I got to make sure I keep that underneath where it goes. And I can go right up to the top here, and then I'm going to backstitch. Because this will be caught in a seam allowance, I'm okay to backstitch there. Sometimes you can't. Okay, so if we look at this, and I close this now, it closes good. Sometimes it gets caught a little bit till you kind of, oh, I know, it got caught on the other side. There we go. I can zip that up, and you can see how that has, I'll move that here, that has kept it at a nice 3/8 all the way up using the throat plate. I didn't have to put tape down or anything like that. I did have to go 1 inch without it, but I was careful to kind of mark it that little bit. So, and it's so much easier. You don't, I mean, you've got your underlap, overlap. Now to finish this off, because this is top stitching, I did not backstitch here. So what I'm going to do is go over to this side, and I lift up this thread, and I get there's a little loop there, and that is the loop of the other thread, and I just pull that through, and I now have both threads. So now I'm going to tie it off, and I like to do a square knot, left over right, right over left, and then I usually do another one, a couple of square knots here. Or you can do surgical knots, which is left over left, left over left, left, right over right, right over right, right over right. Anyway, just do a nice little knot there, and then I usually clip it about 1/4 inch away, and my zipper is complete. And when I sew my seam right here, I'll be sewing this at 5/8, and it does give me just a little bit of space. See, 5/8 is going to be right here, so that gives me a little bit of space if I want to put a hook and eye. But see how nice that is. And when it's closed, you do not see the zipper. So that is your zipper, lap zipper sample using the open seam method.